Pushkin. Hey, Slight Changers. I have exciting news. I've written a book. It's called The Other Side of Change: Who We Become When Life Makes Other Plans. It's available for pre-order now at changewithmaya.com/book. The book comes out in January, and as a first-time author, pre-orders make a huge difference. Your early support will really help define the eventual success of this book. And so if you can take a moment to order it now, I'd be so grateful. You can also find the link to pre-order in our episode description. Okay, now on to the show.
I remember just having this stark contrast in my body of like, wow, I'm nailing this. I'm nailing this thing called life, to immediately total fear, total regret, total questioning, like, why am I here? Why did I ever think this was a good idea?
Beth Rodden was kidnapped during a professional climbing expedition in Kyrgyzstan. She was 20 years old. She survived the harrowing experience using the mentality she'd relied on as a climber, to see pain as weakness and to suppress any negative feelings. But when she returned home, she told me that she applied this same mentality to the trauma she'd just endured.
I felt like I had built these walls around the memories and the experience of Kyrgyzstan. That's like how I felt like I was surviving. And if I break down these walls and I just let these memories and thoughts out, that's totally unsafe.
On today's show, when the mindset that built you starts to break you. I'm Maya Shankar, a scientist who studies human behavior, and this is A Slight Change of Plans, a show about who we are and who we become in the face of a big change. In the year 2000, Beth Rodden was invited on a professional climbing trip with two other climbers. Her new boyfriend, Tommy Caldwell, joined too. But Beth and her group were kidnapped by rebel forces. They were held hostage for 6 days. They witnessed brutal violence and endured freezing temperatures and extreme hunger. It is a remarkable story of survival. A few years ago, I interviewed Tommy about the kidnapping and its aftermath. At the time, I didn't know just how differently Tommy and Beth had processed the same event. In today's conversation, you're going to hear from Beth. Beth started climbing in the mid-90s when she was just a teenager. From the beginning, she says, the climber's mentality just made sense to her.
It's like you suck it up to win. Pain is weakness. You push through all of it to succeed. That was the mindset, or kind of the language in climbing, that really was championed. And for me, that was something that really clicked with me, because I was like, I can do this. This doesn't seem that hard. If something hurts, I'll just ignore it. If I'm hungry, I'll just ignore it. If I'm cold, I'll just ignore it and I'll just push through. I think I'm a pretty driven person and stubborn as well. And so I think that's like a blessing and a curse, in that if I want to do something, I kind of just put my head down until I really feel like I've put into my all.
You ended up turning pro as a teenager. I read that you felt superior to everyone else. You were like on the mountains being like, oh, all those suckers, my high school friends who now are in college, sitting in classrooms under fluorescent lights, sucks to be them. And then there you are scaling these incredible mountains and setting records. So you are invited on a climbing trip to Kyrgyzstan when you're 20 years old. And I'm curious to know, as this budding climber, what are your hopes and dreams for this particular trip?
I think for Kyrgyzstan, I hoped that it would kind of continue this path that I felt like I was on, pushing the limits of climbing higher, especially for females. And then I kind of wanted to broaden my resume and take it abroad. And we had friends and teammates that had gone to the same region a few years prior and had a great time and told us that it was kind of climber's paradise. So we thought we'd have the best trip ever.
So what was it like when you first arrived? Set the scene for me.
The first 2 weeks were amazing and everything we kind of hoped for and more. It's this beautiful valley, the Karasu Valley, this bright green, grass-lined valley with these huge granite walls flanking each side and these big snow-capped mountains at the back. And we were kind of in heaven. We were climbing during the day. We were meeting the locals who would come up and bring us fresh yak milk and butter. And, we were these 4 kids, honestly, at the time. I think John was the oldest one at 25, just kind of having the time of our lives.
Yeah. Can you bring me back to that exact moment when you first realized that you were in danger?
So it was about 2 weeks into the trip, and we were camping on the side of this wall called the Yellow Wall. For climbers, when you camp on the side of a wall, you either can sleep on natural ledges or you bring up these things called portaledges, which are like hanging cots. And so we had 2 portaledges, and we were about 1,000 feet up. We had climbed up the day before, and we had spent the night, and the previous day was Tommy's birthday. And so we had a little chocolate pudding and stuff. And then right as the sky was starting to lighten the next morning, we heard these really loud bangs. As climbers, there's things that you can expect and you can kind of try and prepare for. And initially, I think all of us assumed that it was rockfall. And then when it happened again, we looked down to the ground and we saw armed men shooting up at us.
Wow.
And I remember just feeling this incredible contrast in my body. The night before, the 2 weeks before, the several months before, I definitely felt like I was flying really high. I felt like I was kind of winning in life because it was this kind of non-traditional path that I was taking. Professional climbing wasn't very mainstream at all. So I remember just having this stark contrast in my body of wow, I'm nailing this. I'm nailing this thing called life. To immediately total fear, total regret, total questioning, why am I here? Why did I ever think this was a good idea? I wish I was in college. I wish I was at home, and just regret.
You hear these gunshots and you're looking down, you're seeing the source. Did you have any sense of the conflict that had been brewing in the country and who was who and who was shooting at you? I mean, how did you even start to put those pieces together?
I had no idea of what was going on. We had met locals in fatigues that were part of the Kyrgyzstan military, all super friendly, kind. We would share a meal or show them a CD And so at first, best case scenario, these were people that just wanted to rob us or a misunderstanding or something like that. John volunteered to rappel down first. And as soon as he got down, he radioed up immediately, super monotone, everyone needs to come down.
Wow. Tell me what happened next, Beth.
Yeah, so one by one, we all rappelled down. I had been crying a ton. So my shirt was soaked because of that. I was shaking. I was scared. And I do remember when I first got down, seeing these men, and they had necklaces of bullets. They had, grenades on their belts. They had semi-automatic rifles. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is not a movie. This is not a joke. This is really bad. And I was just completely terrified.
Yeah. How did those next few days unfold?
So that first afternoon, we got in the middle of this huge battle between the rebels and the Kyrgyzstan military. There was gunfire back and forth. Mortars were being shot. We saw people get killed. After that battle, for the next 6 days, we went in a big circle in the mountains. During the day, they would hide us in the smallest crevices under a boulder near the river. They'd cover us with pine boughs and branches. And then at night, we would walk to the next place. We were at 11 or 12,000 feet, and I was wearing a long sleeve shirt and pants. So we were freezing. My jaw hurt from shivering so much. We shoved a few energy bars into our pockets, and we would split those each day with our captors. So we were surviving on 100 or 200 calories per day. For me, it was totally terrifying. I was crying all the time. I was starving, just scared. I'm a person who likes a plan. I'm what's happening? What's the ending here?
Yeah, yeah. Were you seeking comfort in the 3 guys that were with you? I mean, how were you each supporting one another?
So During those 6 days, we were with two captors and they split us up during the day. So they put me with John and they put Jason and Tommy together. And so John was a huge support for me. And he was just so good at redirecting my thoughts. He'd like ask me about my parents. He'd ask about childhood. And so it was just a lot of distracting thoughts, on how to just pass the time, get through the day type of thing.
Was there any element of you that was trying to plot an idea for an escape? And what ideas were you able to tolerate, not tolerate?
Yeah. So the whole time, John and Jason were talking about it. And they were talking about, okay, how can we do this? Like, do we try and steal their gun? Do we, if we're crossing a bridge, do we push them off the bridge? Do we go near a cliff? And I just remember I was totally against it. I was like, I'm good at suffering. I can suffer. I can starve. If something goes wrong, we've seen them kill people. They're clearly not going to hold back if we try and escape or try and kill them. And so I thought it was a terrible idea. Tommy did too.
I want to ask about your dynamic with Tommy in particular during these days, because he was your boyfriend. You had kind of very recently started dating before the trip. You weren't even sure if you wanted to be together. I mean, do you have any distinct memories in the evenings when you're all reunited and you're back with Tommy of what that dynamic was like and how it was kind of rapidly evolving in these crazy circumstances?
Honestly, for me, it was a relief to be paired with John because I felt somewhat responsible for Tommy being there. Jason and I had the same sponsor and they were sponsoring the trip, and Tommy was a different company's athlete. And so I felt responsible, but I was also very scared for him. And so it felt like this other fear that I was taking on.
Bring me to day 6 of this hellscape. You were climbing this incredibly steep terrain. At this point, you were only with one of the captors, Sue. If you're going to make your escape, now might be the only conceivable time.
So it was this ridge, like a steep grassy ledge that you can walk across, and then a steep section where you kind of like do some climbing moves, and then another steep grassy ledge. The entire time we were going up this ridge, John and Jason were like, now's the perfect time. It's 4-on-1. Like, he's totally uncomfortable. And rationally, I was thinking, they're totally right. If there was ever a time, this is the time. But that's a terrible idea. Something could go wrong. Anything could go wrong. And then we're dead. We're injured. Like, something happens. And so as we're all nearing the top, you can see Sue getting pretty excited to get off of this ridge because he's completely uncomfortable. And so he kind of starts to go ahead. And Tommy walks over to me on one of these grassy ledges. And he says, it's obvious that John and Jason aren't going to do this. Do you think I should do this? And I just remember like looking at him and feeling in my head, oh, it sounds so nice to not be held hostage anymore. It sounds so nice not to be in this situation. Of course, that would be wonderful if we could get out. But there's no way I could ever tell him yes to go up there, because what if he can't do it? Or what if Sue sees him coming and pushes Tommy off? Like,
oh my God.
Like
Yes.
all of the things are happening in my head. And I'm just staring at him and I don't say anything. And then I think he takes that as, yes, you should go do this. And so Tommy climbs up beside Sue and grabs his gun strap and pulls him off this ridge. And John and Jason and I are near each other, and we see Sue's body kind of like arc in the moonlight, and we hear him kind of collapse and crunch onto this ledge and then bounce off. And I just remember, for me, feeling so scared, because here we are and we have no idea where he went. Is he coming right back up? Like, what's going on? Like, this complete unknown. I'd never had that visceral feeling of adrenaline before so clearly, where all of a sudden John and Jason and I just sprinted to the top of this ridge where Tommy was, and Tommy had broken down. He's like crumpled up in this ball, just sobbing and screaming and sobbing and screaming. I killed someone. I fucking killed someone. I killed someone, like over and over and over again. And I just remember trying to calm him down, telling him that I loved him. He said, like, how can you ever love me? How can anyone ever love me now? And so just trying to like combat all those things that were coming out of him. And I do remember thinking in that moment, I can never leave Tommy now. Look at what he's going through. Look at what he just did for us, the four of us. Like, I can never leave him now.
Wow. You would later learn that Sue had actually survived that fall, but in the moment you weren't sure, so the four of you made a run for it. You eventually reached a military outpost and then flew home to the United States. What was going through your head when you stepped off the plane?
Honestly, when we got home to the United States, it was just our parents. They met us at the airport. I wanted to just run into their arms,
Of course, like a little girl.
Like I was 20.
Yeah.
I wanted to be just like their little girl and have them like hold me and comfort me and tell me it's going to be okay. And I don't know, I just felt like I needed to have this put together, we're fine facade. And so that's kind of how I walked off the plane. We talked about the food that we had been given. We talked about how KLM upgraded us, just like all the surface level details, but none of the, oh my God, I am so scared. Like, how can I ever go back to normal?
What do you think motivated this response in you? Why didn't you just run and hug them?
I think it was probably a lot of things. Like, it'd probably be nice to point to one thing. But I do think it was part of the climbing culture back then to very much celebrate skirting death as an accomplishment. If you skirted death getting to the summit of a mountain, not only were you a hero for summiting the mountain, but wow, you like outran death somehow. And so we were just these kids and we outran death in one of the most sensational ways. I think back then, feelings in general, like therapy in general, just wasn't as talked about. It wasn't as widely accepted. And so I think I just didn't also have the language or probably the comfort to know how to say that, like how to put words to this type of thing.
Yeah. Did you feel that there was anything that you, Beth, needed to prove to yourself about the way that you were going to respond to this traumatic episode? I mean, you might not even have called it a traumatic episode, to your point about lacking the language, but did you come back and say, like, I need to prove to myself that I'm tough and I can handle this?
I feel like there was probably parts of that, but maybe if I were to go a step further, it was more like I wanted to prove to myself that I hadn't messed up by choosing this climbing path. It was more like, no, you didn't make a mistake. You're going to be okay. This is okay. This is what happens.
Yeah, you didn't want it to be like an indictment on your choices and your decision-making abilities, right? Like, I have an identity of someone who's responsible and makes good choices, and I can't let this experience challenge that. And so instead, I will essentially engage in denial about my suffering.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And jump on the bandwagon of this made me stronger. I will rise above this and be better for it.
We'll be back in a moment with a slight change of plans. After Beth and Tommy returned home from Kyrgyzstan, they moved in together and got married. They threw themselves back into climbing, setting individual records and quickly establishing themselves as the it couple of climbing. They even had a movie made about them called The First Couple of Rock. But while Tommy was able to find some normalcy in his day-to-day life, Beth was struggling. When you came back, what were the first signs that something wasn't right in your mind and your body, and that despite your best efforts, these memories of your time in Kyrgyzstan were going to be harmful and intrusive?
Gosh, I feel like it was pretty immediate. I think there were so many signs and so many indications. And just like one by one, I tried to bat them down. I had nightmares immediately. I had nightmares that our captors came to find us, that they were in my parents' house, that they were on the block. I was terrified of just the world. I felt like the world was a very unsafe place because our captors were coming for us. I was terrified to be hungry because any hunger reminded me of being hungry in Kyrgyzstan because we were hungry the whole time. So I had food with me all the time and not just like a snack. Like I would bring meals with me all the time, wherever we went, just in case. I was really scared to be cold again because we were cold the whole time. So just all these things should have been signs. And I just thought they were like things I needed to like quote unquote deal with.
Yeah. How did your belief now that the world was an unsafe place manifest?
Not in any proud ways. I was scared around anyone that resembled our captors. So anybody with dark skin, dark hair, certain clothing. And I was really terrified to be around big groups of people, just anything where I didn't feel like I could have a very tight grip of control. Like if I could control the situation, right? Like I know these people, I know this place, I know this house, I know this driveway, I know this car, I felt much more safe. But if there was any form of being out of control, like who is this person? Oh, that's Bob's friend. I didn't invite Bob's friend. Who is Bob's friend? I got really scared about that.
Yeah, and paranoid, it sounds like, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. What were the people in your life telling you in this time to try to comfort you? And how were those words landing for you in that moment?
So I went to therapy for the nightmares. I was like still on my parents' insurance. So I think I got 6 sessions or something like that. And she helped me. I thought I checked the box, get rid of the nightmares. And then I thought I was good. But really, I didn't talk to hardly anybody about it. Like Tommy and I never talked about Kyrgyzstan. We talked about logistics, like these people want to interview us or the movie might happen, but we never talked about my nightmares, my paranoia, my fear, what he was going through. He said he was fine. I was like, that sounds nice to be fine. Maybe I should try what you're doing. And so I didn't really talk. I felt like I just controlled my own little bubble.
Yeah. It is stunning to me that you two never talked about this. Were you taking his lead or were you just going with your gut instinct? Like the best way to move past this is just to ignore it?
Yeah, honestly, Tommy always said he was fine. He said he was better knowing that Sue lived. He was stronger because of Kyrgyzstan. And he just like dove right back into climbing. And I just felt like I was in this realm of not being grounded in any way. And after a year of just watching him be fine, as he said, I was like, I want to be fine too. Maybe I should just push all this down, bury it, immerse myself in climbing and move on. And so that's what I did.
It's like maybe if I play the part, maybe if I act this out long enough and just mimic whatever Tommy's doing, I too will have that same response.
Exactly.
It's so interesting, Beth. I mean, one of the many motivations for wanting to invite you on the show is that we did have Tommy on a slight change of plans to talk about his experience. And when I heard about your different recounts of what had happened and how you processed the trauma in Kyrgyzstan, my mind was blown, right? You talk in the book about how you would go on climbs together and he would be in the zone, in a flow state, totally pulled in and immersed in the experience. And your mind was just totally out there, right? I mean, you felt like you were losing your grip on reality. Like, how did it feel to have that disconnect between you two?
I felt like I needed to hide it because I felt like I was doing something wrong. Like here we are on this climb together. Tommy's crushing it. I have the athletic and physical capability to crush it. And yet I am scared every second of death. And so I'm like, I can't admit this. Like I'm just doing something wrong. So I would hide it. I would be like, this is great. Like, look at us go. But I could never tell him or tell myself that there was clearly something else that I should probably confront and think about. I was like, I'm just not there yet. I'm not trying hard enough. I'm not saying the right things. enough. I'm not doing the right things. Like, I just need to like correct this behavior and I'll get there.
Huh. Did you ever come close during this time to revealing anything at all? Maybe when your emotions overwhelmed you past a point of comfort?
I would definitely break down, but it was never, I never said it was because of Kyrgyzstan or PTSD.
Oh.
It was like, oh, I'm not strong enough. Oh, I need some more water. Oh, we're going to have to climb into the dark. Like, our lives were so funneled into just climbing and how to be better climbers. And if there was anything else, it was kind of dismissed. If it was like, oh, we're having trouble with this person or this thing, it was like, oh, we don't worry about that sort of thing. Climbing is the way. And so if I was having these thoughts while climbing, it was because I wasn't trying hard enough. I wasn't focusing hard enough. I needed to like do better, and then I would get there.
Yeah. All of your days were dedicated to this pursuit. You were building a home in Yosemite together. You were taking on climbing feats both together and individually. You were known as like the power couple of climbing. It defined your relationship.
Exactly. Like, everything was climbing. Like, our friends were climbing. We never took a vacation or a trip that wasn't climbing. Everything was climbing, 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 climbing.
And it sounds like the mindset that you cultivated as a climber, the ability to push through pain, to suppress your feelings, to be able to grin and bear it, the ability to compartmentalize, that all of those traits made it extremely challenging for you to approach your trauma in the way that you needed to.
Totally. And I think it's really important to state, because I know it's easy to blame other things. And I'm not saying that it's because of this entirely, but the climbing community at that time was so discouraging of any form of fear or trauma or weakness. I felt like if I admitted this, like if people knew I was going to therapy, if people knew that I was still scared, it would be such a stain on this reputation and this career that I built that it would be almost impossible to erase. So not only was I afraid to do it, but then I was afraid that this would impact my marriage. Tommy was always like, therapy's dumb. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. They didn't go through what we went through. How could they possibly help us? So I was afraid of how it would affect my relationship with Tommy, how it would affect my career, and I didn't want to be seen as a weak person. I wanted to be seen as this strong person.
Sure.
So there was like all this stuff wrapped up in like why I thought it was not a good idea to confront it.
Yeah. Were you extra guarded about your vulnerable mental state, in part because you're a woman and you were already facing such a stigma about your baseline levels of mental fortitude or physical strength?
Exactly. Like, back then, there was like one seat at the table for women on an athlete team or on an expedition, and you were going with guys. And if the guys thought that you were weak in any imagination, then you were not invited, and that seat was quickly given to the next person.
Yeah.
And so it was very much like I had to keep up this persona that I could fill. I could suck it up and I could suffer with the best of them. But I also had this other side of like, wow, like I have these huge feelings, I have these big emotions, and I need help processing them.
Yeah. So you'd been with Tommy since your early 20s, or 2 months before your trip to Kyrgyzstan. And then in your late 20s, you made this life-changing decision. You had told yourself at the top of that mountain, I'm never going to leave Tommy. And you decided to begin a new chapter of your life with your now husband, Randy. I can only imagine how complicated that was for you, Beth, to navigate. And I'd love to hear what led you to that point.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I started dating Tommy when I was 19, and we were together like nearly a decade, married at like 22. And I honestly thought after Kyrgyzstan that was it. Like, Tommy and I were good. We were great climbing partners. We loved each other. But I think as I went through my 20s, I started noticing things in our relationship, cracks. It would be this kind of similar with PTSD. I'd notice it and then I'd just like try and shove it away.
What kind of things were you noticing that you learned to ignore?
There was like a lot of things. I had so many issues with his parents, and to the point where, I mean, as you know, I'm in my mid 40s now, but at the time, I was like, why aren't you putting us before your parents? I'm like, this seems like an easy thing to do. And he was just like, nope, we got to toe this line with my parents. And I'd be like, wow, I feel like a child. This is not okay. But I was like, okay, I guess we're towing this line. So like, I feel like things like that, I started to build resentment for. And again, I think with resentment, I was like, it's okay. And then when it would come back another time, I was like, oh, it's stronger, but it's okay, you know? And so I'd notice these things come in.
And when you would find yourself frustrated by, for example, things with his parents or other things that couples can just get annoyed at one another about, would you find yourself ever saying, but he saved your life, Beth, you have to stay with him?
I think at times I would probably say that, but more so I was like, he's a great guy. You'll never find another great guy like this. He's a great guy. You'll never find another great guy like this, because Tommy's a great guy, right? Like I don't want to ever say Tommy's not a great guy, but people can be great people and not the right person for you. And so I think I heard it so much from our friends, like Tommy's an amazing guy. That I think I just was like, wow, I'm like screwed if I ever am not, if I feel like this relationship isn't good, like this is the best you're ever going to get. And I had been telling myself that. And then honestly, we built a house together. We framed the house. We put on the roof. Like we just did, you know, like manual labor together for a whole year. And I know like building a house with somebody is stressful, but it was the first time that we were doing something together that wasn't climbing. It was just like, you know, the mundane things of like, oh, if we're going to make dinner after a day of building, like, do we have anything to talk about? Am I interested in what he has to say? Is he interested in what I have to say? Like, I'm really tired of this building. Can we go to the beach? We've never gone to the beach before. That seems uncomfortable for us. Oh, we're not going to the beach because we don't know how to do it. You know, it's just like all those things that I'm like, oh, wow, maybe this isn't it. I don't like how we're working together. Like, I don't like how I was just like, wow, I don't like this. And so after the house, we went back to climbing. I was like, we have to get back to climbing because I can't be with that person. I don't want to be that person in that relationship. And so we got back to climbing and it kind of felt normalish. But I think once I had seen that, I started noticing cracks more and like maybe letting resentment in, maybe like deciding to dig deeper into things that I was bothered by that maybe I wouldn't have mentioned before. And then that's when I met Randy and I was like, oh, wow, maybe this isn't the relationship for me. So I met Randy while I was still married to Tommy. And I think I was always one of those people that was very judgy of people who had affairs or were unfaithful. I was like, well, if you're unhappy with this person, then just leave and then start the new one. I just thought it was like a very easy thing. Like I didn't ever think you had to stay with somebody, but I thought you needed to like be cut and dry about it. And so I found myself in this very, gosh, it was so hard, like sticky, messy, whatever you want to say, situation where I didn't know how to leave Tommy and take the leap. And so I ended up having an affair with Randy before I left my marriage to Tommy.
Mm-hmm. When you and Randy got married, your life changed in a lot of ways, right? He was a climber, but he was more of a recreational climber. He had a much more well-rounded life and normal job. And you guys also decided to have a child together. So much changed in terms of your orientation towards climbing and what a focal point that had been for you.
I think when I first was with Randy and like having this quote unquote more normal life, you know, I'd go out to dinner with his friends or I'd go out to a company party. I just remember feeling like my brain was getting massaged. I was like, oh, wow, people have these great, interesting, intelligent conversations about all sorts of things because all I ever do is talk about climbing or the weather or my skin or whatever, you know, just like anything related to climbing. And so I think being with Randy and him opening my mind to like, there are so many paths you can take in life and there are so many ways to be happy. Whereas I was fully drinking the Kool-Aid that climbing was the best thing out there. We were better than other people. We knew more than other people. Like we are doing the right thing and everybody else is just living this inferior life. And so being with Randy and seeing like all these ways people are happy, they're interested in other things, they're challenged by other things. It was just kind of this refreshing thing. And then once we had our son, it's just another layer of how to live life. And even before our son was born, little things would bubble up. I was like, I'm uncomfortable because I don't know this person and we can't invite them into our house. And he's like, why? And, I'd try to explain the Kyrgyzstan thing. And he was like, you're safe. They're safe. Like, this is all okay. And I felt very challenged and like a little bit resentful. And he's like, I think you could go to therapy about this. And I think you could probably heal a lot from this. And I was very much taken aback and, said, you have no idea what I went through. I don't need to go to therapy. And so I was very standoffish at first. But when we had our son, it was very apparent that this little bubble and this like tight, narrow path on how I felt safe in the world was not a way to raise a child. And so that's when I finally thought, okay, maybe I should give this a shot and see if it's possible to 15, 20 years later heal from PTSD.
It's one thing to commit to therapy and to say, okay, I need to change something. It's another thing to lean in to the process of therapy and actually make yourself available to your therapist in a way that actually yields returns.
Honestly, it was terrifying for me because I felt like I had built these walls around the memories and the experience of Kyrgyzstan. That's like how I felt like I was surviving. I was like, I can go to sleep at night because I have these walls. I can fly on an airplane because I have these walls. And if I break down these walls and I just let these memories and thoughts out, that's totally unsafe. And so I remember the first session sitting down with her and saying that exact thing, like, are you sure? Because I've been able to go 15 years. And if this makes it so I can't go anymore, that's not worth it to me. And she assured me and reassured me. And so I was like, I honestly just felt like I was taking a leap of faith. I was like, okay, here we go.
And was there a short-term cost to letting that all out into the world? Because I know in the past when I've had irrational fears and I've been in deeply avoidant modes, and then I engage in some kind of exposure therapy, and sometimes it's just mental exposure therapy, right? Like allowing myself to engage in those like really uncomfortable, painful thoughts. It is more uncomfortable in the short term, but then over time, you become less and less afraid of those thoughts. They become less and less threatening.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there were maybe a few sessions where by the time I got home, I was still scared and on edge and raw. I remember there was one session in particular where, we would work through thoughts and memories that were particularly difficult for me. And one that was particularly difficult was the sound of Sue hitting the ledge. Like I just didn't let myself think about that for 15 years. But if I started to think about it, I could tell I was getting very nervous and scared. So when that session in particular, I remember looking at my therapist and I could see her talking to me and I could hear audibly that there were words and sounds coming out of her mouth, but I actually couldn't understand what she was saying. And that's exactly how I was after my first concussion. I would be at dinner with somebody and I could see and hear that they were talking to me, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I told her that. I said, wow, I can't actually hear and understand what you're saying right now. This feels exactly like my concussion. And she said, sometimes when people go so deep into trauma, it's a similar response in their brain. And I feel like there were two other sessions I can remember that I had that similar experience with, that I went so deep that it felt like a brain injury or something.
Do you remember a moment when you first realized, hey, this confronting thing is working? I'm becoming less scared. Like, was there a moment where you would have acted one way in the past and then you found yourself acting differently?
I don't think there was an actual moment when I think about it, but I do know I could feel my anxiety and my need for control loosen over time, in that I felt like I could actually, it felt like taking a big breath and just relaxing into my body, to the point where I was like, I don't feel like I've relaxed into my body for 15 years.
Wow. I'm so happy that you have had that release.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Life-changing.
Yeah. Beth, obviously, this is something you continue to work on, and you have faced new challenges. I've been following very closely your challenges with childbirth and what it did to your body and all the discomfort there. You've also recently talked about your experiences with perimenopause. You've been very, very vocal about all of your injuries and for climbing and how that's affected you. I mean, you are like Miss Vulnerability, and I don't know if you ever thought you would be that person.
Yeah, I feel like it's a nice thing to be able to have those conversations in a community that had so much positivity in my life, but also had these things that lurked in the shadows that weren't ever talked about. You know, our community has so much death and trauma in it. You know, it's just the nature of what we do. And so I think to just know that those conversations are welcome, it's a wonderful thing, honestly.
Yeah. As you look back at your evolution, how would you describe your mindset today? So before it was very much a suck it up and persevere. How does it look different today, if at all?
I feel like I'm generally still Beth. You know, like if I forget my water on a climb and I need to get to the top to get more, then I'm still that like, okay, we got this. Like, you can do this type of thing. But I'm also the type of person that I'm, you know, if I'm able, I'd be like, I'm actually good going down. You know, I don't need to go to the top. That's fine. This climb will be here tomorrow. I can come back then. So I think I'm just much more of like, the feelings are okay. They're valid. You don't have to just be one way to survive, which I feel like before I was always like, there is one way for success and happiness and achievement. And if you deviate from that, bummer for you. And now I'm like, there's a million ways. Find your own way and it'll be great.
Thanks so much for listening. Next week, we're re-airing my conversation with Tommy Caldwell, so you can hear from him then. If Beth's story resonated with you, or if you faced your own version of confronting the past, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to me on Instagram at Dr. Maya Shankar or through my newsletter at changewithmaya.com. And next time, writer Sahil Bloom talks about quitting the rat race and redefining what matters to you.
As the years went by, I became more rather than less focused on money being the path to living a good life. I grew so convinced that like this one scoreboard was the one that mattered, that every other area of my life started to show cracks.
That's next week on A Slight Change of Plans. See you then. A Slight Change of Plans is created, written, and executive produced by me, Maya Shankar. The Slight Change family includes our showrunner, Tyler Green, our senior editor, Kate Parkinson Morgan, our producers, Brittany Cronin and Megan Lubin, and our sound engineer, Erica Huang. Luis Guerra wrote our delightful theme song, and Ginger Smith helped arrange the vocals. A Slight Change of Plans is a production of Pushkin Industries, so big thanks to everyone there. And of course, a very special thanks to Jimmy Lee. You can follow A Slight Change of Plans on Instagram at Dr. Maya Shankar. See you next week.